again, all of these are new to me. I had never built a company before. I don't have a network. I don't even know anyone. I mean, when I look back at it, it's like, that was so crazy. I had no idea how you start a company. Like, I had no idea this thing's going to work.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Health Technology Podcast. My name is Christine Minotto, and I'm the director of the UCSF Rosenman Institute at University of California, San Francisco. Today, we're talking to Dorna Hakimi, the CEO and founder of BioInspire, a startup based in Palo Alto. Their technology is a flexible film made of naturally occurring protein, which can be used to deliver drugs to specific tissues, and then the films get resorbed so it does not cause inflammation. Dorna is from Iran, went to Vancouver to continue her graduate study, and moved to the Bay Area to work for industry, and then decided to start a company. She started BioInspire in a rented room in a machine shop in Santa Rosa, working on benches from Costco. It's a true bootstrap story. And last year, she took on a role of a campaign manager for a city council and won. She is a Renaissance woman. And enjoy this talk. If you like what you hear today, please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. The 2019 Rosenman Innovators application is now open. The selected innovators will receive coaching and mentoring, variety of in-kind services, and the opportunity to pitch in front of our early-stage investors network. Deadline to apply is Thursday, April 18. And for more detailed information, go to our website, www.rosenmaninstitute.org. Oh, welcome, Dorna. Thank you for joining me today at the UCSF Rosenman Institute. So I was looking at your background a little bit. You started BioInspire, but then you grew up in Iran, and you did your undergraduate in Iran, and you go to school in Canada. And tell us how's your childhood like, and why did you move to Canada and come here?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. I was born and raised in Iran. I did my undergrad there in materials engineering, but I always knew that I wanted to kind of be part of a bigger research organization. I wanted to be part of the bigger world of research and what everybody else was doing. So I got admission to go to University of British Columbia in Vancouver. It was a group that I really liked. I wanted to join them. So I joined them in 1999. I started doing research, and I ended up working on a project that was a thin film coating with biocompatible properties. And we were basically doing it in general. We were focused on how to create a thin film coating.
Not so much focused on the healthcare.
Yeah, no, we were not really focused on where it's exactly going to be used or who is going to be using it. It was really, I was a new grad student. I didn't know anything about medical devices. I was really focused on the material science and how you create that coating. But interestingly enough, this was the time of stents, and everybody was working on stents. And it was a big business. Everybody was coming up with new ideas. And one of the issues with the stents were they were causing restenosis. And people believed the reason the restenosis is caused is because the material is not very biocompatible. So if you coat it with other materials that are more biocompatible, then you can have better outcomes. And I'm not aware of any of these that is going on. So we were approached by a company in Vancouver who had a stent, and they were looking for coatings. And we were working on a thin film biocompatible coating. And they came to us, to my supervisor, and they asked if we could work with them. And they licensed our patent. We had filed a patent on our coating. So I started working with them on the side.
While you were a student?
While I was a student, grad student. Then I finished my master's program, and I entered the PhD program. I was working on tissue engineering, which is completely different from a thin film coating, but I continued working with them on the side.
Why the transition from materials to go to tissue?
No, actually, I was working on tissue engineering from a materials perspective. I was working on designing a new scaffold for bone tissue engineering that has interesting properties. Is stronger than normal tissue engineering scaffolds. It's bioresorbable. So that was of an interest to me. But on the side, I was also working for the company, kind of furthering the research on a thin film coating. They ended up hiring me full-time before I finished my PhD. So I was doing my thesis and working full-time. So I would go home at 6 or 7, start writing my thesis, and then go to work the next day. So
it's kind of nice. You got paid.
Yeah, I got paid, exactly. It was pretty intense, though, but it was really nice. And that was my introduction to medical devices and what medical device is, what industry is. I always been in academia. I had no idea how a company runs. What does it take to develop a medical device?
Was it like a startup company?
It was a very, very small company. We were 5 or 6 people, and nobody had a medical device background, interestingly enough. So there was a lot of room to learn. So I kind of joined the team and I started picking up on different things. I picked up responsibilities along the way. Nobody knew how to design a clinical study or animal study, or how do you design your research program. So, and I always raised my hand. I said, I'm going to go figure it out. And it became a great learning opportunity for me. So I learned I remember the first time I had to Google a clinical protocol to just figure out what are the different parts of a clinical protocol. I was an engineering student. I had no idea.
Google is everybody's
great.
Good
Exactly. And then on the other side, the industry also had moved from, this was the year that drug-eluting stents came out. So basically the technology shifted from basically a bare stent into a drug-coated stent. So the team and my company sat together. It's like, now we have to put drug into the stent. And none of us knew anything about drugs or what they look like or how do you deal with them. Like, we had no idea. So that was another thing we had to learn. Okay, how do you take a coating, you take a drug, how you incorporate the drug into the coating, and a drug is not stable. How do you even look at a drug? Like, how do you even look at how the drug is coming out? I mean, it was such a new area, and there wasn't a lot of published data out there. It was such a new technology. J&J had just came out with Cypher, and nobody was publishing anything. So we kind of had to learn and find our way through the program, which again, it became a cornerstone in my career, just learning about that drug device combination products and how do you combine the two together and how do you look at it, how do you analyze it, what are the issues that you might encounter.
Right. So what happened to that company? It's kind of interesting. Do they bring in people who has that experience in the drug?
I know. Actually, we kind of ended up learning a lot of it on our own and figuring it out along the way. We ended up doing animal studies that were very successful. We did a clinical study in South America. That was the time everybody went to South America to do clinical studies. We did a study in Brazil that was very successful. And we actually transferred manufacturing to India. That was another thing for me to learn, to go to India and try to transfer technology and manufacturing to another country. That company was eventually sold to a Chinese company, and halfway through, I moved to California.
Okay.
And
what is it like working in, doing the technology transfer in India?
It was hard. It was I had no idea. Again, a lot of things in my life, when I look back, are things that I just jumped in without knowing what's involved and just try to learn along the way. I think it's just a little bit of craziness, I can say, but it was hard. The travel was hard. Staying there was hard. It was different cultures, having to figure out how things work, teaching people. And then there were a lot of technical problems going from a small R&D lab into a manufacturing facility. You have to solve a lot of technical issues that come with scale up, which, again, we didn't have any experience with. But we powered our way through and we made it happen. We ended up being able to manufacture in that facility. So I'm proud that happened. It was a tough road to get there.
So the product is still on the market with the Chinese market?
I don't believe it's on the market. I think the technology is there somehow in some pipeline. Exactly. I haven't followed it. I don't know exactly where that technology is today.
Okay.
But it changed hands a couple of times along the way. So I didn't follow it.
And then you moved to California.
Yeah, I mean, I realized Vancouver is a great place to live. I had lived there already for almost a decade, so I loved Vancouver, but I realized my career is really important for me, and if I really wanted to get somewhere and I wanted to do interesting stuff, I should come out here. So I moved to California to work for a company in Northern California in Santa Rosa. It was a spin-off from Medtronic, and I was hired to kind of join the technical team to develop new products, including drug-eluting balloons, which was the new thing that came out, that was out there. Unfortunately, it was really bad timing. It was 2008. A lot of anybody who needed to raise funds was having trouble.
Right.
So,
what was your role, and what do you learn from that experience?
It was great. It was still a startup, but it was more organized than the startup I had worked in. So it was fascinating to see there are people whose background is actually clinical. Like they've actually done this work before. So it was great to meet people who were professional at what they were doing, and they were not trying to find their way around things. And I met great people there, and I really enjoyed interacting with them. But it was really short time because the company needed to raise money. I actually became part of the team who was raising funds, but unfortunately we were unsuccessful to raise money. So the company had to close down. The technical assets was bought by another company, but the actual company had to close. And this is 2009 by that time. I'm in California. I had just moved here. I have no job. I don't know anyone, literally. I'm living in Santa Rosa. So what am I going to do?
Yeah. This podcast is sponsored by IO Life Science, a Silicon Valley-based medtech design and development consultancy, transforming your technologies into unique healthcare solutions. For more information, you can visit their website at www.iolifescience.com.
I actually thought about going to biodesign programs. Like, okay, maybe I can go to school again and learn. At the same time, I had an idea that to combine the advantages of a drug-eluting balloon with a drug-eluting stent, I had been toying with this idea in my head. I had no idea how am I going to do that, but I just had this idea in my head. And I had met a physician when I was working in Vancouver, Raul Bonin, who is a pretty renowned cardiologist. And he used to also work with Medtronic. He was on the scientific board of Medtronic. So he used to come to Santa Rosa often. Okay. And one of the times he was coming there to visit, I kind of tracked him down and I said, "Can I have coffee with you?" So we had coffee. I remember the coffee shop we were sitting in, and I pitched him the idea. I'm thinking about this in general terms. What do you think? And he was very positive. He said, "Oh, it's really interesting. If you make this happen, I'm willing to be part of it. Like I will help you." Okay. So having his approval and his enthusiasm kind of pushed me towards maybe this is real. Maybe I can do this. So
that is the technology foundation for BioInspire.
For BioInspire, correct. And we ended up meeting a few more times. He put in a little bit of money. I rented a room in a machine shop in Santa Rosa. So there was this machine shop. They had an extra room. I rented the room.
For you to work, not for you to sleep.
Yeah. Yes. I still had an apartment to live in. But I went to Costco, bought a few benches, and that became my lab benches. And literally for a year, it was me, and I had another an engineer I had met who came and helped me with some catheter design. But I was there pretty much all by myself every day, prototyping and coming up with ideas of how I'm going to make this happen. At
that time, you have some small seed funding? Or
no, basically we had enough money to pay the rent and buy maybe 5 or 6 chemicals from Sigma Aldrich. And then we had to pay our lawyers, so we had to file patents, and we had to have a lawyer who would set up the company. Again, all of these are new to me. I had never built a company before. I don't have a network. I don't even know anyone. I mean, when I look back at it, it's like, that was so crazy. I had no idea how you start a company. Like, I had no idea this thing's going to work.
Did you try to Google it?
I did. I did a lot of Google search. I did a lot of reading. But we ended up filing a couple of patents, and luckily the prototyping worked. So I could actually make what I wanted to make. We did an animal study, and at that time we actually could attract some seed money from angels who were med device people who had just had exits and they were successful, and they took a chance, and they invested small amounts of money along the way. That money enabled us to do our first preclinical study to show the technology works. And another thing we learned was, wow, we created this technology that could be used in cardiovascular, but could be used in so many other places. And cardiovascular is not the only place we could go.
Yeah, so, maybe you can tell us, like, what is the technology?
Sure. So the idea was, the initial idea was, with the stents, you have a permanent implant that elutes a drug for 30 days. But when the drug is gone, the implant is going to be there for a very long time. Then on the other side, you have drug-eluting balloon technology, where you only have few seconds to get the drug into the tissue, and then you can't have a longer-term release. But the good news is you don't have a permanent implant. So my idea was, can I combine the two together? So the initial idea was, can I create this solid glue and literally glue the drug to the wall? But I wanted the glue first to be solid, because you don't want to inject glue into anybody's artery. I wanted it to be really controlled. I wanted to stick to tissue, fully biocompatible, and completely bioresorbable. So initially I thought, I'm sure there is something off, the shelf that I could go buy. So I was starting looking at different technologies and different people and what they're working on. Interestingly enough, nothing like that existed. Something that actually sticks to tissue, is bioresorbable and biocompatible. So that's really what I was building in my lab. I was trying to design a new material that did this. And that was the core idea. That was the core patent. But then at the end of the day, we showed that it could work in the artery, which is the most difficult place, because you have this flow, you have to deliver it against the flow, you have a balloon, you have to get it off a balloon. So there are a lot of other technical challenges, but we made it work. It actually worked in an artery. But the outcome of that was, we have this pretty much just a sticker. This is a material that you could put drug in it. You can stick it anywhere inside the body, like a Band-Aid. You stick it on the heart, you can stick it on a kidney, stick it anywhere, releases a drug for a period of time, and then it fully disappears, right? You don't have to suture it, you don't have to staple it, you just basically place it. So the question was, where should we go? The cardiology, by that time, again, the industry had moved. All the big companies had already kind of bought the technologies they wanted. The market was becoming pretty stable. Nobody was making any purchases. And it became clear, to bring a cardiology device, it would take a large sum of capital, which is very hard for a small company to do if you're not acquired by a bigger company. So we thought, okay, let's find another place where we could use our technology. And we spent a summer doing opportunity assessment. We looked at different technologies, different drugs, different unmet needs. We went through this really systematic approach of looking at different areas we could go to. And we landed in the ENT space, ear, nose, throat. There was a big need there. It's very hard to get steroids into the sinuses to reduce inflammation. It's an upside down cavity. No drug actually stays there. And it sounded like a perfect technology. You could go into the nose and stick one of these in there and release the drug over time, which sounded like a perfect match for the space. By this time, we had raised a little bit more money, because we'd shown we are real, we are capital efficient, we are actually creating a product that has a lot of potential. So it became a little bit easier for us to raise money. And then we moved from Santa Rosa to Palo Alto, which was a good move. We couldn't actually hire people. And one of my biggest challenges was, I didn't know anyone. I didn't have any connection. So I had to spend a lot of time networking and meeting people and trying to hire people and convince them I'm real. It's a one-man show right now, but this is real. One moment show, exactly. So I actually hired a very small team, but very smart, small team. I think we were 5. Uh-huh. With 5 people, we got the technology to a place. We did all the preclinical work. We set up quality system. We got approval to start a clinical study in Europe. So we went to Europe and we did a clinical study, really well designed, and we showed the technology worked. It was safe. It was effective. Physicians really liked it.
This is 5 people for how many?
It took us about, from the time we started, we focused on the ENT and started building a company around it. It took us about 1.5 to 2 years to start the clinical study. So that study was really positive. We ended up publishing it in peer-reviewed journals. It attracted a lot of attention, and it actually helped us to come back to the U.S. and try to raise money to start a U.S. focused program, which kind of the standards were higher. We had to hire a bigger team and kind of go through the FDA process, which took us a long time. I mean, that's another long story.
Yeah.
But one of the biggest challenges which I've kind of experienced working in the space of combination products is your regulatory process is not as straightforward. Kind of understanding where you belong in the FDA is a long, lengthy process that takes a lot of conversation and a lot of work.
Do you work with a consultant or do you work with the in-house?
At that time, I had an in-house regulatory person, but we always had multiple consultants that we brainstorm. I mean, there's a lot of strategy involved. We did all of the hands-on work ourselves. We would come up with a strategy, but we would double-check it with multiple group of people with different backgrounds. But again, we were kind of charting new territory. Our product has drug, device, and biologics. So all 3. And I think one of the interesting aspects of this technology is the material I was talking to you about is made of a protein, which is called fibrinogen. It's a blood protein. Fibrinogen is interesting because it adheres to tissue. It's completely biocompatible, absolutely bioresorbable. That gives the product really interesting properties that you could never create with a synthetic material. But it makes your regulatory life very difficult because it's a protein. And we are, maybe I can say this with pretty good confidence, we are the first people who are using a protein basically just as a substrate, as a material, not for therapeutic purposes. So that was one of the hardest challenges to communicate with the FDA.
Did they want to see safety data on how it interacts with your human body?
Actually, a lot of that, I mean, we had done a lot of work. We were pretty comfortable with that. We spent a lot of time just understanding where we belong. Did we belong in a device group? Did we belong in drug group or biologic group? We spent a lot of time having those negotiations.
And at the end?
At the end, we ended up in the biologics, which was unexpected because we didn't have a biologic function, but we were happy to have a home. We were happy about that. It's like we finally can move forward. We have a home.
I think once you know the known, it's just kind of nice rather than work with unknown.
Yeah, and we were ready to do all the work that's necessary. We just kind of wanted to move forward. So that was an interesting experience. We ended up doing a lot of work, a lot of scientific work. I learned so much about biochemistry, protein characterization. Again, I jumped into territory that I had no business being in, but it was fascinating process. It was frustrating at some level because, we wanted to move forward and we were waiting to see where we were going to end up. We didn't know which direction to go, but on the other hand, it was pretty fascinating area to explore as well from a scientific perspective.
Do you want your startup to receive coaching and mentoring, a variety of in-kind services, the opportunity to pitch in front of early-stage investors, and be showcased at the 2019 Rosenman Symposium at UCSF? If so, application is now open for the 2019 Rosenman Innovators. Deadline to apply is Thursday, April 18. And for more information, please go to rosenmaninstitute.org. So do you team up with the drug company for the drug aspect of it? Because
we actually we focus on drugs that are already off patent, so we could basically buy it from a supplier. There's no licensing involved like any other material. You basically buy it from a supplier. They provide you with all the documentation. You have a supply agreement basically with a pharmaceutical company, which again, a lot of learning process along the way of how you do that. How do you choose a supplier and how you interact with them, negotiating contracts with them, all kind of learning experiences along the way. There are certain things about a combination product development that is very interesting and challenging at the same time. For example, building a team, right? You need people who know devices. You also need people who know drugs.
Right.
People who come from a medical device background see the world completely differently from people who come from a pharma background. But for example, half of my team was med device and the other half was drug. And it was hard to make sure everybody understands each other. They're not, they feel that they're part of the same team. You build a culture that everybody actually communicates. Yeah. They understand where we are going to go. It's very hard to find people who's specifically done the role that you're looking for. Right. So a lot of times you go for potential. Is that, you look for people who are willing to step outside their comfort zone.
Like what you did.
Crazy people like myself, exactly.
I feel like there's a lot more collaboration now from different background, like, the engineering, the science, and, with all the new technologies out there now.
Yeah, you have
and the data people. It's like everybody is like the ability to manage different functions, I think is really useful to have.
Exactly. And that's what makes it interesting, but challenging at the same time. One of just as an interesting note, most of the people from pharma world, they come from bigger companies. Mm-hmm. And med device people are used to working in a startup environment, having a lab, that is basically the warehouse that's turned into a lab. But people coming from the pharma world, they look at that, and the first time they see it, they almost have a heart attack. Is this the lab?
Is this real company?
Is this real? It's like, are you actually doing something? So you basically have to hold their hands and make sure that they
we're real, we're legit. So at that point, how much have you raised for the company when you do the US?
When we started, so we raised another almost 20 million. So by the time we finished the clinical study, from the day we started the company, by the time we finished the clinical study, we had raised about 2.5 million. So we kind of got there really very capital efficient. After we got the clinical data, we raised a 15 million, actually a 20 million round. And the 20 million was milestone based. Mm-hmm. So we didn't receive 20 million, but we got money along the way to really enable us to have a US strategy and be able to, again, the bar is pretty high for a combination product. Mm-hmm. In terms of quality system is not a drug quality system, it's not a device quality system. So you have to kind of build a more intricate quality system, which is probably harder than both.
Yeah. Everything becomes more specialized.
It's more special, and it's more judgment based. Again, things are not as straightforward. It's not written down. Depending on your product, your risk factors, what you're working on, you have to create something that maybe didn't exist.
You cannot follow a template. You just every step of the way is a decision making.
Exactly.
It could be very exhausting.
It's exhausting, but again, that's what makes it interesting, because you're not just following books. You have to make a lot of gut decisions. Mm-hmm. You have to be very smart about what you do. It's more challenging, definitely, than a straight drug or a straight device. It's a different know-how. It's a different way of doing things.
Yeah.
But I've spent all my career in it, so I wasn't fazed by it, but it's definitely more challenging. But as you said, that's where the technology is going, combining different things together. Right. So if you just want to stick with one thing, you can do less interesting things.
Right. Yeah.
So you're right in that sense.
So, tell us what you do now, because you step aside from, you are the CEO of the company, you raise the money, and now you step aside from the CEO role, become a board member. I mean, how do you make that decision and why?
That's the hardest question. it took me about 1.5 years to make that decision. I had already spent 9 years on the company, from basically the day I had the idea in my head till I stepped down. It was more than 9 years. So it was a really hard decision. It took me about 1.5 years to come to that place. I knew the company was finally in a place that could have a life of its own, and it wasn't necessarily dependent on me. We had a good team of people who brought a lot to the table. They really smart people that had joined the company. And also, I felt the company was getting to a stage that needed, basically, we are going to build manufacturing facility. We are going to do phase 3 clinical studies. So the company is also going to a different phase of its existence. And it seemed the right time for me to step away. But also, so logically, I was convinced this was the time for me to step away. But emotionally, it was hard to bring my emotion and my logic at the same place. So it took a lot of fights and self-struggle and soul-searching.
So what went through your head?
So there were days, so every day was different. One day I felt like this is the best decision. I should just step away. There were days that it's like, this is the worst mistake. I can't do this. This is a company I've built. I can't just let it go. I have to stick with it. So every day was a roller coaster of how I felt. It took a very long time. I had really good people in my life that I could go talk to and kind of brainstorm with. But then at the end of the day, it's your decision.
Exactly.
And you don't know. I mean, you kind of making a decision and you hope for the best, that this is really the right thing. But I was convinced logically this was the time for me to step away. And
do you feel like you kind of feel burned out, or you just want to try something new?
Again, so part of it was for the company. I knew that if the company also was at the stage that could use different skill level. I'm more of an early stage, kind of come up with ideas, solve intellectual problems, build the company to a next stage. I could stay with the company and kind of go to the next stage, but intellectually, that's a little less interesting to me. It's more kind of operation and execution than problem solving in terms of technical problem solving, in terms of intellectual problem solving. So I knew that's where my passion is in general. And the company was kind of graduating from that. Again, I felt comfortable with the team that was around the company, the investors who were around the company. So I felt the company could live even if I wasn't there. Mm-hmm. And it was an inflection point because we were raising money. This was a time that new investors would probably join the company. So it was a right time for me to step away. It was a time that could happen. If I had to stay longer, maybe I had to stay longer after that. So there are so many different factors that kind of
good timing too.
And I was tired too, and it was a long time, basically going through a lot of struggles along the way, fundraising and regulatory and technical, and it was a very involved project. So I could have welcomed some time off and be able to kind of look back and reflect on my life as well. So
because you did raise the money first before you decided to step aside.
We were kind of in the process. We ended up not raising that money as my own investors or the investors around the company stepped up and took it forward. But yes, I spent a lot of time fundraising before I step away, which actually became another interesting learning experience. But
what did you learn from that?
Is hard to learn to raise money if you're stepping away. So it's even harder.
That's expensive.
Yeah, exactly. So so I finally made that decision, and I stepped away from CEO role end of August in 2018. And the first 2 weeks, I literally slept 24 hours a day.
That's really nice.
It felt like I had not slept in a very long time. So that was a good sign for me to know I made the right decision. I really needed that sleep. So
because people always say you cannot banking on that sleep. I guess it's not true.
No, actually, that kind of showed me I made the right decision, and this was the time for me to step away. So, and then after that, I'm spending a lot of time doing things that I always liked to do, but I never had the time to do. I joke with my friends, I'm doing a lot of right brain activities. Okay. I'm taking writing classes and improv classes. I'm taking a philosophy course, an art course.
That's nice.
Yeah, I'm going to a lot of jazz shows, which I really like. So a lot of the things that I always liked to do. And
you didn't have the time to do it.
Never had time to do it, or the peace of mind to do it, really. So I read a lot. I socialize. So I had lost touch with a lot of friends because I never had time to socialize. So it's been really, really great to have that opportunity. And also the most important thing maybe I do these days is reflect on the last 9 years and lessons learned, and how I look back, how I would do things differently, or what I really learned, and put things in perspective. And it really takes stepping away from something and keeping a little bit of distance till you can actually and truly, honestly reflect on it.
This podcast is sponsored by IO Life Science, a Silicon Valley-based medtech design and development consultancy, transforming your technologies into unique healthcare solutions. For more information, you can visit their website at www.iolifescience.com. So what would you say, like your top 3 that you think that's a major learning lesson that you learned for the last 9 years that you can share?
I think I'm still distilling that for myself. So I can't really say in any authority that those will be my first top thing. But some of the things that comes to my mind is definitely it's a marathon. And people tell you that this is not a sprint, this is a marathon. It's hard to believe it until you actually live it, because you always have the next goal and you're pushing really, really hard to get to your next goal. And you forget to think about it, that, how much of myself and how much of my energy I'm putting into it. And working in a startup, especially a really early stage of startup, so much depends on you as a person. In a bigger organization, you have a system, you have people, you have teams. But in an early stage, when it's you and maybe a couple other people, so much depends on you. So it's easy to get lost in your excitement and enthusiasm to get to the next thing, to really pace yourself and really understand, you have to keep your energy to go for a very long time. So remembering that keeping things in perspective of where you want to go, and it's really important. And again, it's also a personal journey. I feel I grew up so much with the company, of things you worry about initially and versus things you worry about a lot later on. Sometimes I see entrepreneurs who are just starting off, and I can tell from the first conversation that this is their first time and they're just starting. It's so endearing. You see their energy and the things they worry about, and then you realize that's
they'll pass and it'll be no big deal.
Yeah, exactly. Things that you worry about initially are things that along the way they become non-issues at all. But at the same time, I feel a lot of those people have to live through it to really understand it. It's like children, right? I mean, no matter how much your parents tell you when you're growing up, this doesn't matter, or you should focus on this, you don't take it seriously because you think you know better, because this is your life, right? So no matter what other people say, you still have to go through it. So
and I think when you live through it, you gain insight rather than just getting people advice, because I think your insight's also important.
Exactly. And you grow with it. You grow with your company, you grow with your challenges. And the first time something negative happens, you kind of...
life is over.
Yeah, you feel like everything's done. And then after the 10th time, you kind of learn.
You look back like, the 9th time it happened, I'm still here.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons is as an entrepreneur, and somebody who's running a company, you have to have that ability that when everything has gone wrong and there seems to be no hope, you have to find it somewhere within yourself to get up, dust yourself off, and just go fight it. Even though there is no hope, you still have to find it within yourself.
Do you think that is something that you gain as part of your personality as a person, or do you think that's something that you believe in certain passion, why you do what you do to keep on going?
I think all of the above. Part of it is passion. Part of it is I just didn't want to lose.
Yeah,
I didn't want to fail.
Yeah.
I wanted it to work. So maybe it's ego. And I always feel like to be an entrepreneur, you have to have certain level of ego. You have to believe in yourself because otherwise you would never do it. And I think that's where it comes to help you because you just, despite everything, despite the reality, you still want to go make it happen. And if you don't have that, you give up very early on. But also the other thing that helps is, as we talked about, going through it multiple times, and you kind of learn that it's possible. You can still, you grow a thick skin. You've been punched so many times that you feel like, what's one more? I can handle it. I'm going to go fight.
And also have that fire in the belly. It's like, I'm going to prove you wrong.
Exactly. And actually that's a very important point because along the way you meet a lot of naysayers and you always want to go out and prove them wrong. So it's actually a good motivation along the way.
Do you think you felt you have that even when you're a kid? Because sometimes, you see that. Is it because you think your parents instilled that on you or just...
No, actually, they are the ones you always want to prove wrong. No, I always felt I had that. I was always very competitive. If you tell me something can't be done, that's exactly the thing that I want to do. And I always was like that.
I wonder if your parents do some reverse psychology.
Yeah, exactly. Talk to me in reverse. And that's exactly what I will do. So I found that actually the most exciting part of being an entrepreneur, to always be the underdog, that you're vowing everyone and you're just going out there and proving that you can do the impossible and you can do the very hard thing. Everybody can do an easy thing, but for me, that's what was my biggest motivation is I'm doing something really hard. And I'm going to do it and I'm going to make it happen.
So what's next? I mean, you have, this writing, jazz music.
Yeah, actually, I did another fun thing. I have a friend who was running for city council and I ended up becoming her campaign manager.
Fun.
I know. And I had zero, again, another thing, I jumped in without really knowing anything about it, but ended up being a really great experience. I really enjoyed it. And it was a good kind of a different thing after what I had done. And she won and she got elected. So it was really fun.
Oh, that's fun.
So maybe I pursue a career in politics. I don't know.
Yeah, well, we definitely need more.
Yeah. No, actually, I'm kidding about that. I actually don't know what's next.
Yeah.
So right now, I'm kind of getting myself back to being into that state of being excited and taking my time, look at different things, no matter what it is, just bringing that curiosity back of just looking at things out of interest, not as a business interest, but just everything that is interesting.
And everything will fall in its place.
Yeah, and just kind of waiting to be inspired. So
No, I like that. Your attitude is like, I always think like if you keep on doing the same thing that you know already, that's not so fun.
Exactly. And so I'm looking for something that kind of triggers my interest again, or I feel inspired, or I feel like I'm jumping in to make it happen. So I don't know what I'm going to do next. Yeah.
So you mentioned you read a lot of books, and I asked a few of our guests, like what books that would you recommend?
Oh, wow. Actually, I don't think people would be interested in books that I read because I read only novels. It's kind of funny. Most of the people that I meet that are kind of like serious business people or entrepreneurs, they're always reading about medical devices and how to develop a device. And, they're really serious people. And I think I do have a side of me that is kind of maybe not that serious. So.
Yeah, no, I know one investor, he loves reading history.
Yeah.
And so he's listening to everything about China. So it's not necessarily that they only read books that have business related.
Exactly. So. And I think life is very broad and inspirations come from so many different places. So life is broad and you just can't be one-dimensional. You have to look at different things and learn. So actually, I've just taken a philosophy course at Stanford about meaning of life. So I'm reading a lot of we were just reading Schopenhauer and Camus. So I really like philosophy too. So just understanding what life means in general, which is pretty cool.
Wow. You do keep yourself busy.
I do. I mean, that's the thing. There's so many interesting things in life that there's no shortage of things to do. So.
I'm sure I'm looking forward to see what you're going to do next.
Don't put pressure on me.
No, I'm looking for something fun. Fun ideas that, I definitely can take advantage of suggestion on fun things to do.
I'm always there. Just call me.
Okay, that's good. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. This was really fun.